Hello, good evening. I'm Blake Burman. This is The Hill on NewsNation. A hospital hit. Doctors and patients inside Israel targeted by Iran. It is 1 a.m. in the Middle East tonight, and we will take you there live as President Trump suggests a big decision is about to come. Plus, was it a stadium showdown? What actually happened at Dodger Stadium today involving Major League Baseball's top team and federal law enforcement? A top DHS official is with us live tonight here on The Hill. Also tonight, back in the spotlight, why Joe Biden, Barack Obama, and Bill Clinton are all before the cameras. But first tonight, here from The Hill, a timeline from the Commander-in-Chief. The Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt stepping to the podium today and reading off this message from President Trump.
I have a message directly from the President, and I quote, "Based on the fact that there's a substantial chance of negotiations that may or may not take place with Iran in the near future, I will make my decision whether or not to go within the next 2 weeks."
To go, meaning whether or not the United States will strike inside Iran. We begin tonight live at the White House, where the administration today was repeatedly questioned about that timeline. Our Kellie Meyer standing by for us live on the North Lawn. Kellie?
You've been digging into that timeline. So the president says within 2 weeks, could be hours, days, weeks at this point. But by the 4th of July, according to the president, we'll know whether or not the U.S. plans to strike Iran.
I think the president has made it clear he always wants to pursue diplomacy, but believe me, the president is unafraid to use strength if necessary. And Iran and the entire world should know that the United States military is the strongest and most lethal fighting force in the world, and we have capabilities that no other country on this planet possesses.
So talking about that timeline, Blake, one senior intelligence official telling me soon that's when Iran could obtain a nuclear weapon. Another saying it could be months, even a year, before Iran obtains a nuclear weapon. And only one person will be able to make this call at the end of the day, whether or not the U.S. will join in on these strikes on Iran. And the president is trying to decide this diplomatically first. Leavitt says talks between Iran and the U.S. are ongoing, all while Iran and Israel continue to exchange fire. Blake.
Our Kellie Meyer live at the White House tonight. Kellie, thank you. So as President Trump weighs that decision, the continued destruction across the Middle East, an Israeli hospital hit overnight by an Iranian missile attack. That hospital serves the southern part of Israel and sustained extensive damage in the strike. The Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, visiting the scene this morning, vowing that he will not let up his fight.
They're targeting civilians because they're a criminal regime. They're the arch terrorists of the world. They want to have nuclear terrorism, which will put the entire world under nuclear blackmail, and they would use these weapons. That's what the Ayatollah Khamenei says that he would do. He would use these weapons to wipe Israel off the map.
In Iran, the Ayatollah taking to social media to encourage Iranians to, quote, continue in this behavior with strength. Joining me now, live here on The Hill, Daniel Shapiro, former U.S. ambassador to Israel, with us live in person. Nice to see you, sir. Nice to meet you. Thanks for being with us tonight. So let's start with the timeline. The president basically saying he's going to have a decision within 2 weeks. That could mean tonight, tomorrow, next week, at some point in time. Is it prudent for him to go down that path, to give this sort of 2 week buffer here?
What he's done, first of all, is identify the correct objective, which is to take away Iran's ability to enrich uranium, which basically gives them an ability to produce a nuclear weapon. And it's all focused on this one deeply buried underground facility called Fordo, which the United States has unique capabilities.
Right.
So he's now put on the table the basically overt threat that the United States will use military force, but created a window for some coercive diplomacy. That is to have partners and allies, the Europeans meeting with the Iranian foreign minister tomorrow in Geneva, maybe our Gulf partners as well, speaking to the Iranians, say to them, look, you're going to lose this facility one way or the other. You can lose it through diplomacy in this window of time, or the United States is going to act.
So you say you describe it as an overt threat. Do you think it's possible that he would actually take the next step?
It's certainly
and strike inside Iran.
It's certainly possible. He's put in place the forces that would help him or enable him to conduct that strike. We have a second aircraft carrier on its way to the Middle East. There are tankers and fighter aircraft. The bombers would come at the end to actually conduct the strike, but all those other forces would help shape the battlefield and then be prepared for any retaliation. So
look, the president is the commander-in-chief. He also believes he's the ultimate deal maker, right? And someone who inherently believes that he can put deals together. And he's done it in the Middle East with the Abraham Accords, right? But there's also the question of, is Iran just stringing him along for these next 2 weeks? The White House was asked about that earlier today. I want to get your reaction on the other side.
Look, Iran is in a very weak and vulnerable position because of the strikes and the attacks from Israel. And with respect to the president's statement, I shared that with all of you. And he has been very direct and clear. Iran can and should make a deal. We sent a deal to them that was practical, that was realistic, or they will face grave consequences.
Are they stringing him along?
Well, he has set this 2-week window. I actually think that's a little long. One of the things we saw a few minutes ago was that strike on the hospital in southern Israel. Yep. The longer this goes on, the more possibility there is that something very, very bad will happen, which could cause an escalation in this conflict. So a limited period of time for the Iranians to understand what's at stake and to make the decision we need them to make should be offered. But 2 weeks is kind of at the outside.
So what do you think the window is then? If 2 weeks is too long, and let's just say tonight, it would be at the front end. Right? And I'm just theoretically.
There's a meeting tomorrow in Geneva.
Okay.
Let's see how that meeting goes. I would say there should be some follow-up discussions with the Iranians, either by Europeans or by our Gulf partners, maybe even the president's envoy himself, Steve Witkoff, who was conducting negotiations before the war started. But I think we have realistically a week or so, maybe even a bit less than that, to know whether the Iranians are going to take this seriously.
What's the goal here? Is it regime change? Is it wipe out the nuclear capabilities and facilities, or is it both?
The goal is not regime change. It shouldn't be. We shouldn't be getting into that business. That's something the Iranian people are going to have to decide. It's a terrible regime. No one should shed any tears when it finally passes from the scene. But this goal should be focused on the very clear objective of taking away Iran's ability to enrich uranium. That is the ability that gives them the path to a nuclear weapon. And it's just too dangerous to allow this government that has launched direct attacks against Israel, that has armed terrorist organizations around the Middle East, to have that capability. So that has to be taken away from them.
In 2019, it was basically 6 years to the day. June 20th of 2019, Iran shot down a drone over the Strait of Hormuz. And President Trump responded the next day, Ambassador, by saying, I had it ready to go. It was cocked and loaded, but he asked the generals how many people would die. And the general, this was a post that the president put out, said 150. And he basically said that it wasn't, and here it is. On Monday, they shot down an unmanned drone flying in international waters. We were cocked and loaded to retaliate last night. This is 2019. On 3 different sites, when I asked how many will die, 150 people, sir, was the answer from a general. 10 minutes before the strike, I stopped it, not proportional. That was 6 years ago, basically, to the day. What do you think President Trump has learned, and do you think that is a precedent for how he thinks and operates?
I don't put myself in the president's mind. Obviously, trying to avoid civilian casualties is appropriate. In this case, everybody knows the target we're talking about. It can be even notified in advance when the strike is coming, more or less, so that those who need to evacuate can do so. Actually, the Israelis have been doing that with a lot of their strikes because they're fixed targets. And it's, in this case, I wouldn't give them too much time. Again, there's the risk of them spiriting away some of the enriched uranium they house at that facility. But it is possible and it's appropriate to try to make sure there are no civilian casualties.
Dan Shapiro, former U.S. ambassador to Israel, with us tonight here on the Hill. Nice to meet you, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks. Talk again soon. Joining me now, other side of the table as we swing the camera, Mark Short is the former chief of staff to Vice President Mike Pence. Hello, sir.
Good to see you again.
Nice to have you in. 2 weeks. Where do you think the president is tonight? You know him well.
Look, I think that the president is pretty resolute here, Blake. I think the reality is in the first administration that he didn't hesitate to take out General Soleimani. Mm-hmm. He applied maximum pressure to Iran. I think what Iran has got to question is this really, an idle threat that they want to question and take as if he wouldn't be taking action when they know he has in the first administration.
The 2-week timeline. You know this, I know this, but I want to share it for our audience. You're already chuckling because President Trump says 2 weeks a lot, and in a lot of cases, it's sort of 2 weeks goes by and you forget about it, right? For example, here was just a few quotes that we've dug up here in the last few weeks, and then we'll get to it on the other side.
Do you still believe that Putin actually wants to end the war?
I can't tell you that, but I'll let you know in about 2 weeks, within 2 weeks.
You made a determination on kind of what those tariff rates may look like and the timing of those?
I have. I'll announce it over the next 2 weeks.
But remember, once you announce, the stock market's going to go up 2,000 points, and people will relax a little more.
It can wait 2 weeks.
They can wait. All right.
You trust President Putin? You know, in about 2 weeks.
We got to get this big, beautiful deal done. We got to get it done, and get it done now. Don't wait 2 weeks. Don't wait 2 weeks.
All right, so he does this often, right? That's just the last couple months. But on the other side, there was the 60-day threat that the president gave to Iran, and then bang, just like that, Israel didn't wait a second longer.
Right.
So how do you perceive sort of this within 2 week decision that's come out of the White House today?
Well, and to your point, I think that Iran's got to be thinking that if 2 weeks elapses, that Israel is going to take another step. So look, I think if you look at the first administration, there was no doubt in how resolute the president was. I think there are more divisions inside this administration on foreign policy, and there are more divisions inside the Republican Party on foreign policy. I don't think that's debatable, Blake. But I think it'd be hard for Iran to basically assume this is an idle threat.
Right. As I mentioned, you know the president well. Where do you think he's leaning tonight?
That's a really hard thing to try to put
I know it's a hard one.
I think the president has said all along that Iran cannot have nuclear weapons. And I think that you've said that America has the tools to make sure that that's the case. And it's been 46 years since the revolution in Iran, and they have been the leading state sponsor of terrorism across the Middle East. They have killed thousands of Westerners, and they continue to sow unrest. So I think that probably the president's going to have a pretty clear decision here to make. And I think that if Iran just tries to run out the clock and have more negotiations, I don't think there's any evidence in the last 46 years that that's going to work.
Right.
And I think the president knows that.
All right, we'll leave it there. Mark Short, see you back later in the show.
Great. Thanks, Blake.
Appreciate it. Still to come tonight. Here on the Hill, another live look from Tel Aviv as the commander-in-chief weighs that big decision. The ranking member of the House Armed Services Committee is with us tonight here on the Hill. Plus, another big story. Did you see what happened out west today, or at least the headlines out west? Federal law enforcement at Dodger Stadium. What the Dodgers are saying tonight, what ICE, or at least the federal government, is saying tonight. A top official with Homeland Security with us on the other side of the break. And SpaceX, do they have a problem? Oof. That Starship rocket exploding at the launch site. So what happened? Elon Musk chiming in today. We thank you for being with us tonight here on the Hill. It's nice to be back after a few days off. Lots of news. I'm Blake Burman. I'll see you on the other side here in 4 minutes. All right, welcome back here to the Hill on News Nation. The scene earlier today from Dodger Stadium. You can see from our affiliate station KTLA in Los Angeles as their helicopter flew on over there just how close to that sort of showdown or the protests were. Reports that ICE agents tried to gain access to the stadium's parking lot started making the rounds this morning. The team, the Dodgers, saying on social media that they turned them away. ICE then pushed back saying, quote, false, we were never there. Now, the Department of Homeland Security said it was Customs and Border Protection agents who were there, and it wasn't related to an enforcement action. But regardless of what happens, when photos of ICE vehicles were posted online, protesters there descended on Dodger Stadium. Again, one of the more iconic buildings there in Southern California. It comes as the Dodgers have faced criticism for not taking a public stand against immigration raids and deportations. But the organization was reportedly planning to break its silence and pledge support for LA's immigrant communities. The Dodgers say tonight's game against the Padres will go on as planned, but questions remain like what happened and what will come next. Tricia McLaughlin is the Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs over at the Department of Homeland Security. Tricia, live with us here tonight on the Hill. Thanks for coming in. Nice to see you.
Great to see you.
Always,
thanks for having me.
Of course. So the Dodgers said that there was basically that ICE was denied entry. From your perspective, as you know it, what happened there at Dodger Stadium today?
So not my perspective. What the facts are, ICE was not at the Dodger Stadium. It was Customs and Border Protection vehicles. They were very briefly there, just parked, and then they left. There's really nothing to do with an enforcement action, nothing to do with the Dodgers at all. This is a very large stadium, but I do think that LA Dodgers should know, and really the American people should know, 75% of arrests under this administration by ICE are done to convicted criminals or criminals with pending charges. So, I mean, these are really the worst of the worst we're getting off of American streets. And to continue to vilify and demonize our ICE enforcement officers as they're facing a 500% increase in assaults against them, it's not a good look.
I'm going to get there in a second. The Dodgers did say, though, that entry was denied. Could the Dodgers deny entry to ICE as you know it? And I guess it gets to the next question of, are Major League Baseball parks and stadiums one of the next places that ICE officials could go?
Our number one priority is the worst of the worst, these violent, criminal, illegal aliens. So if a MS-13 gang member, Tren de Aragua, convicted murder, rapist, if they're seeking safe harbor in a stadium, there's a possibility that we could go in. We're not saying no to anywhere. We are going to make sure we're getting these worst of the worst criminals off of American streets, no matter where they are.
So there's been a bit of a shift, right? Because the president basically made a statement last week about farms and leisure, and it raises the question, Tricia, of if you own a farm, a hotel, a restaurant, whatever, and you have an employee there or someone there who you believe to be an illegal immigrant, but you also believe that they are not a violent criminal, as you put it, should they expect ICE to show up at their facility?
Worksite enforcement is very much a cornerstone of our enforcement operations. Like, we find that there's drug traffickers there, human trafficking, labor trafficking. Oftentimes at these work sites, they're really exploiting these migrants and they're using them for cheap labor. And so we're not going to take any options off of the table, but we are number one priority is focus on those violent criminals.
So no options off the table, meaning ICE agents could go to any place, whether it be a place of business, a place of worship, wherever.
If we believe that there is a violent, criminal, illegal alien there, we will go there.
And I guess what would you tell those who are not violent, illegal, criminal aliens?
I'm so glad you asked this, because the best, safest option for them is to take advantage of the CBP Home app. We are offering those in this country illegally $1,000 and a free flight to head home and then potentially come back the legal right way. But if they don't leave now, they could be arrested, they could be deported, and they will never be allowed to return to this country. So we really encourage everyone who is here in this country illegally, self-deport now. It's the safest option for you.
Let me ask you about facilities, because the Attorney General in the state of Florida has a video out now about a possible alligator Alcatraz, as he's calling it. I'll get your reaction on the other side.
I think this is the best one. As I call it, alligator Alcatraz. This 30 square mile area is completely surrounded by the Everglades. You don't need to invest that much in the perimeter. If people get out, there's not much waiting for them other than alligators and pythons.
Is that necessary? Is that needed?
We definitely need more bed space. I haven't looked particularly into what this facility could look like, but we are very focused on getting that big, beautiful bill passed. It would get us more bed space that we can be housing people. We have incredibly high standards at ICE, and also it will get us more CBP agents as well as ICE agents. Let me leave you with this, Tricia, because you are the Department of Homeland Security, and I can't get past, given with the ongoing conflict in the Middle East, Israel and Iran. The former FBI director, Christopher Wray, last April said the most immediate concern has been that individuals or small groups will draw twisted inspiration from events in the Middle East to carry out attacks here at home. We have seen that, unfortunately, in the recent months. And we continue to keep our eyes on Tel Aviv and the Middle East. Given this newest conflict, has the threat level, given what Christopher Wray said last year as well, has it changed at all? I'm not going to get ahead of Secretary Noem, but what I will say is our Homeland Security investigators are hyper-focused on getting terrorists that we know are in this country out. We'll leave it there. Tricia McLaughlin with the Department of Homeland Security. Thanks for being with us tonight. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me. Talk again soon, of course. All right, still much more ahead tonight here on the Hill. The presidents, the Iranian nuclear facilities. What might happen next? The White House says, or at least, the White House said today, up to 2 weeks. What does that mean?
the ranking member of the House Armed Services Committee, joins us live here on the Hill. And live pictures, Galveston, Texas, former President Biden is about to go before the cameras here in the next half hour or so. It fits a bit of a theme. What's going on with him, Barack Obama, and Bill Clinton? When we come back. Welcome back. 6:30 here in Washington, 1:30 in the morning over Israel, as it is officially 1 week into the conflict between Iran and Israel. Israeli jets bombing a nuclear reactor under construction in central Iran during a wave of airstrikes. Iran launching strikes of its own on a major hospital in southern Israel, as well as residential buildings near Tel Aviv. At least 240 people wounded. Israel putting the blame squarely on the Ayatollah, and our Robert Sherman is live for us once again tonight in the Middle East. Robert?
Hey there, Blake. And that barrage of missiles coming from Iran has stirred anger on the ground here in Israel, hardened resolve, and given every indication to the Israeli leadership that they will be pushing forward. We haven't seen barrages like this in days here in Israel, but now what we saw here just within the last 24 hours, certainly changing the landscape here. What you're looking at on the left side of your screen right now, that is eyewitness video that we obtained while we were on the ground here at one of these sites. And you see the seismic blast that these missiles are creating here, the damage that they do to blocks at a time. That's what you've seen from all of these missile impacts all over the country today. And it was more than just this one missile impact. If you go down to Beersheba in the south, well, this is where that one missile landed at a hospital there, the largest that is in the region, causing hospital staffers to move all the patients out and get care elsewhere. The defense minister for Israel touring the damaged sites, putting the blame squarely on the Ayatollah, blaming him for targeting civilian sites and saying this.
We decided on the goals of the war. The goals are to eliminate the nuclear threat and put an end to the missile threat. Amid this, the IDF has been instructed and knows that in order to achieve all of its goals, this man absolutely should not continue to exist.
The message from the top in Jerusalem tonight is that after this most recent salvo of missiles, they are not backing down from their operations and their goals of eliminating the Iranian threat, both on the nuclear and the ballistic missile side. But everyone here in Israel is waiting for that big decision. Do the United States come and support them in the war effort, or do they steer clear? Well, the Israelis saying tonight that either way, they're going to keep going. Blake?
Our Robert Sherman in Tel Aviv. Robert, thank you. The White House press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, today walked right up to the microphone and shared this message, as she put it, directly from the president.
I have a message directly from the president, and I quote, "Based on the fact that there's a substantial chance of negotiations that may or may not take place with Iran in the near future, I will make my decision whether or not to go within the next 2 weeks."
Well, as the president decides what to do next, new polling on what the public thinks here at home. The Washington Post, a poll there finding that more Americans are against the U.S. striking Iran. Joining us now is the top Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee, Congressman Adam Smith of Washington, with us once again here on the Hill this evening. Congressman, thanks for being with us. Always appreciate the time, sir.
It's good to see you. Thanks for the chance.
You as well. So I spoke at the top of the show here to Dan Shapiro, who was the former U.S. ambassador to Israel. I'm sure you know the name. And I asked him about this 2-week timeline, and he thought, Congressman, that it should be shortened, that a decision should come in less of a time frame than that. Where are you this evening, sir, as it relates to the commander-in-chief and his decision and when it should be made?
Well, I think it's good that the president is being deliberative about it and examining the pros and cons. Personally, I do not think we should attack Iran. I support what Israel is doing in Iran. I'm glad that we are supporting them. We're helping them with the defense against some of the missiles coming in, intel and other things. But for us to get directly into a war with Iran, I think would be a mistake. We have a number of forces in the region. We have bases in Bahrain and Qatar, as well as Iraq and Syria. all those troops would be very difficult to protect if we got into a war with Iran. So I think we should not dive into this and directly attack Iran.
Very difficult to protect. If it were to go that route, I guess there's a line between very difficult and the God forbid of something happening. Do you believe that troops would be in harm's way?
Well, it's hard for me to imagine that if we struck Iran, that we would not have American casualties. Iran would clearly strike back against U.S. forces. They know where we are. They know the vulnerabilities. And I doubt seriously that we have sufficient missile defense capabilities to stop everything that's coming in. This happened a couple of years ago when Iran launched a barrage of missiles at us in response to, I think it was the killing of Soleimani. It might have been something else. We wound up with no casualties, but the missiles weren't stopped. They hit different parts of the base. We managed to get our troops out in time. So that vulnerability is real and something that we would have to consider.
Do you think that's, or let me phrase it this way, how much do you think that's weighing on the commander-in-chief tonight? Because it also seems like, Congressman, that there is this moment of if you are going to get rid of Iran's nuclear regime, the moment is now.
Yeah. Well, I think what has happened, Israel has weakened Iran's nuclear regime, but that's the other big unanswered question that we haven't gotten, clear answers on, as an unanswered question would be, is how much has Iran's nuclear program been weakened? We had been estimating that it was, weeks that Iran would be able to break out and actually have a nuclear weapon from the moment they decided, based on the enriched uranium that they had and the capabilities they had. How much has that been set back? And how much would it be set back if we dove in and started bombing as well? Most of the expert analysis that I've heard, and this is a conversation that's been going on for better than a decade, is that it's far more difficult to destroy Iran's nuclear capability than one might think. We could go through all of this effort and they could still be mere months away from actually developing a nuclear weapon, which is why I think President Trump is right to say, we would prefer a negotiated settlement and to try to push for that right now.
Do you think, so the question was asked in the briefing room today, I thought it was a good one, about whether or not Iran is just stringing along the president here for the next couple weeks. As you know, he views himself as a deal maker and the ultimate deal maker and someone who was able to put together the Abraham Accord. So the question is he being strung along? Here's the White House response. I want to get your reaction on the other side.
Look, Iran is in a very weak and vulnerable position because of the strikes and the attacks from Israel. And with respect to the president's statement, I shared that with all of you. And he has been very direct and clear. Iran can and should make a deal. We sent a deal to them that was practical, that was realistic, or they will face grave consequences.
What do you think is happening here?
Yeah, well, I don't think it's so much that Iran is stringing them along, but the details of that deal matter a great deal to us and to Iran. Iran wants massive sanctions relief, and we don't know what that deal was that President Trump offered, but Iran conceivably could have looked at that and said it's not enough sanctions relief, number one. Number two, we want to go beyond just the nuclear aspect of this. Iran has a robust missile program, which, as we've talked about here, threatens our troops in the region, threatens Israel. And also, Iran continues to support terrorist proxies in Yemen. They support Hezbollah. They support Hamas. They have various Shia militia groups throughout Iraq, less so in Syria these days than they used to, but still a problem. So part of our negotiation would be to get Iran to stop supporting those groups and stop building the missiles. So it's quite possible that the details of the agreement are what is holding this up more than Iran just stringing us along with no intention of action.
Would you ever trust them on a deal? Because it's gotten to this point.
Right. I don't trust anybody, just as a general rule.
Okay.
You need to have, things verified. You need to have guarantees. Certainly on the nuclear side, the guarantee is the IAEA. To have the inspectors in there looking and making sure that they have access to everything that they need to have access to. So, the Reagan quote is cliche in my world, but trust but verify, I think is the right approach.
We'll leave it there. Adam Smith is the congressman from the state of Washington, ranking member of the House Armed Services Committee. Thanks for the perspective, sir. We'll check back in soon.
Thank you.
Of course. Live pictures now. Galveston, Texas. This is indeed a live look as former President Biden will soon take part in a Juneteenth event at that very church. It's not the first time that we will have seen the former president. It's also not the first time this week that we will have seen a former Democratic president. Is there a theme here when The Hill returns? All right, welcome back here to The Hill on News Nation. 6:45 here in Washington tonight. President Biden, yet again, about to make another appearance, a public appearance. He is in Galveston, Texas this evening. The former president attending a Juneteenth celebration. This is a live look, by the way. That is the historic African Methodist Episcopal Church, where the former president should be speaking here any moment now. And he's not the only former Democratic president making public appearances this week. Bill Clinton been popping up, all a part of a new book tour as well, for example, to tout his latest project alongside the co-author James Patterson. He even showed up on The Daily Show this week to share his opinion on the Israel-Iran conflict.
Do I think that we have to try to stop Iran from having a nuclear weapon? I do. I tried at that, and we had some success. But we don't have to have all this outright, constant killing.
And then there's President Obama, who also this week opined publicly on what he sees as numerous government officials who are not holding up their oath to uphold the U.S. Constitution.
When that isn't happening, we start drifting into something that is not consistent with American democracy. It is consistent with autocracies.
But a Reuters poll out today raises the question about looking backwards versus forwards. 62% of Democrats say that their party needs new leadership. So are these three bridging the gap in a time of no leadership, or should they take a cue from the polls? Full panel here with me now. Mark Shorts, the former chief of staff to Vice President Mike Pence. Jonay Wartell is a Democratic strategist. She is the national political reporter for The Hill, Julia Manchester. Niall Stanage is the White House columnist for The Hill as well. Hello to you all. Thanks for being here. Nice to have you all in. What's going on here? I see all three of them out, Jonay, this week. That poll says, you know what? We need new leadership. I could also say there is no leadership, so are they bridging the gap? What's happening here?
Well, seeing these past presidents emerge is perhaps strategic, yes. But listen, there's a lot of fondness and a bit of nostalgia with these former presidents and from their legacies, right? We see the strength of the legacy of leadership of the Democratic Party. And I think this is a time to be reminded that there were some great things that happened under Democratic presidencies. And so this is a moment to kind of be reminded of that. But we've seen that these presidents have had very active post-presidency lives. So writing books, going on speaking tours, going on podcasts. This is not something that's new, per se. This is something that seems a little strategic given the timing.
But the polls say, like, stop.
Well, we can do both and, right?
Okay.
New voices can emerge in the party as they should, and we can also celebrate the legacy of leadership across the party with figures like Obama, who, by the way, has tremendous favorability in the Black community amongst young voters. And this is a time for Democrats to really re-engage and re-energize their base. So why not engage with some of the most popular presidents who can do just that?
Trump was chirping all over the place, Mark, after his first presidency, before he ran for his second one. Is it any different?
I don't know. It's re-energizing the base to have Joe Biden out there. But look, I don't think it's hard to criticize the former president from going to Galveston to celebrate Juneteenth.
Yep.
But it's clear the Democrats are struggling to find who their next leader is. And I think Republicans probably cherish seeing the former presidents continue to be out there. And I think there's probably a lot of Democrats who do wish that they would follow the model of George Bush and actually just retire.
So here is, you bring up George Bush. Here's what he said back in 2017, I believe. Watch.
I made the decision after my presidency not to criticize President Obama, and I feel the same way about President Trump. And people say, why? First of all, the office of the president is more important than the occupant. I want anybody who's president to succeed.
He's kind of been the outlier here a little bit.
He's been the outlier, but I want to go back to that poll because I don't think that poll is about any of these three former presidents. I think it's about the lack of leadership we're seeing right now in the Democratic Party because there is no leader. They're asked about the leadership right now. Technically, it's Ken Martin at the DNC,
Right.
and you can actually go back, this past week to really see the, internal fighting that's spilled out into the public within the DNC and the Democratic Party apparatus. You have figures like Randy Weingarten and other union heads stepping out.
The teachers union.
Stepping out of the DNC. You have David Hogg, the former vice chair, saying, I don't want to run again. And he's starting his own organization to primary House Democratic incumbents. So there's a lot of, I think the Democratic Party has yet to find its voice in this second Trump administration. And I think that poll is just saying they haven't rallied around one figure.
Just to add to Julia's point, not all ex-presidents are the same. Right? I mean, Gallup poll earlier this year, Barack Obama's favorability, 59%, Joe Biden's favorability, 39%. That's a pretty big gulf.
There's also been a lot of time, right? Normally, time heals.
Yeah, but I mean, also Obama was a two-term president and was generally well thought of, even at the end of that presidency. There's also a difference between Barack Obama coming out to warn about creeping authoritarianism in the shape of President Trump and Bill Clinton coming out to flog a book. So these things are different scenarios, and I think they're judged differently because of that.
So it's very clear who the leader of the Republican Party is. It's the President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief. A live look in Tel Aviv tonight as it is approaching 2 a.m. in the morning there, Niall. President Trump has given basically, I don't want to say a 2-week ultimatum, because it might not necessarily be 2 weeks, I guess up to 2 weeks, but it is a very big decision that the Commander-in-Chief has at some point here in the upcoming days on what to do next and whether the U.S. will strike.
Certainly, a massive decision. I mean, one of the most interesting things in terms of domestic politics is this split we're seeing within the Republican Party and the broader movement, where you have the Tucker Carlsons, the Steve Bannons of the world warning against the United States getting enmeshed in another foreign conflict. And against that, you have much more conventional voices in the Republican Party. Ted Cruz, Lindsey Graham, a number of others, wanting the maximal support to Israel.
Would you frame it that way, as sort of MAGA versus not MAGA, or first term versus second term, kind of?
I think it's both, to be honest. I mean, I agree that there's voices not just outside, but frankly inside with Tulsi Gabbard. So it is even inside the administration. But I do think the first administration, despite having larger personalities, was pretty united in the foreign policy, in particular as it came to Iran. And I think that the maximum pressure campaign is something that was very successful, and I think probably colors Iran's decision here about how serious the president is.
69% of Democrats, Jonah, have a negative view of Israel. That was a Gallup poll 2 months ago before this war essentially broke out. There are questions on your side of the aisle as well as to how all of this should be handled going forward.
Right. I think that
Does that concern you, that 69, basically 2/3 of your party has a negative view of Israel?
Well, that's a single poll. I'm sure you could pull out other polls to show tremendous support amongst Democrats for Israel. But I think what's important to understand here is that, no one wants to go to war. Republicans, Democrats, President Trump doesn't want to go to war. And so how he handles this conflict, I think, will say a lot about the U.S. and our position on the national stage. But the president's between a rock and a hard place. And I'm interested to see on the Republican side how many more voices we see of dissent for going to war against Iran and this strike. Because I think it's important to see that the president does not have every single member of his party locked up when it comes to every single foreign policy point. And I think that it's interesting to see who is going to come out and really be a strong voice, especially as we're in 2026 election cycle now. Folks are going to have to be on the trail defending it.
Do you think there will be a divide as well over how close Iran is to a bomb or not to a bomb within the party?
I don't think there is. I think that most people believe that they actually are very close to having nuclear capability. And I think that, again, for 46 years since their revolution, they've lied about what their capabilities are, and they've murdered people within their own country, and they've murdered Westerners across the Middle East.
Before the president tonight, take me home.
So before the president, look, in terms of Iran, or I mean, look, Trump has put out this 2-week timetable. I think he's used 2 weeks before, so who knows if they'll actually stick to that or not. But I mean, this is going to be potentially a defining moment of his presidency. We're seeing some comparisons, and obviously we could say this is like apples and oranges, but I've been seeing a lot of comparisons today in 2025 to 2003, ahead of the Iraq War. This is a president who campaigned on taking the U.S. out of foreign entanglements, and it doesn't seem like he's pushing that way.
I got to run, but you could go back to then and basically what he said campaigning against George W. Bush, even we were just talking about it. Thank you all. Appreciate it. Still to come here on the Hill. Did you see what happened last night? My goodness. What is behind that with SpaceX, and what is Elon Musk saying today? And Elizabeth Vargas reports. Coming up here at the top of the hour, she's talking to the man who just evacuated hundreds of Americans from Israel. That is 6 minutes away. My take, other side, when we return. Oh, wow. Did you see this last night? The explosion there of the Starship rocket while on its launch pad last night in South Texas. Elon Musk writing today that it potentially happened when a nitrogen composite overwrapped pressure vessel in the payload failed below its proof pressure. I'm not a rocket scientist, never claimed to be one, so I can't sit here and tell you what may or may not come next. And as I've said before, failure is inevitable this early on for Starship. And failure can also be viewed as progress, trial and error. But it's been more than a bit of turbulence for Starship recently, as its recent test flights also experienced problems. However, this also can be viewed through a different lens as well. What this means for our space program. After all, your taxpayer dollars, in part, head to SpaceX. Now, the Starship rocket, the largest ever built and basically the size of the Statue of Liberty, is a big part of NASA's Artemis program, which hopes to land astronauts on the moon by 2027. SpaceX is on the forefront of some of the most remarkable innovation in this country, no doubt about it. But for now, a reminder of the mountain that Starship is trying to climb, or in this case, more than that, the moon and Mars. I'm Blake Burman. I'll see you tomorrow. Have a good one. Elizabeth starts now.